They were just trying to build a road. In 1997, a crew of engineers cutting through the uncharted desert badlands of eastern Sudan stumbled upon something that shouldn't have been there, a slab of carved stone, jutting out of the sand like a broken tooth. Beneath it lay a tomb. Not Egyptian, not Nubian, not anything the experts could recognize. Inside, no mummy, no treasure, only a skeleton so dried out it crumbled when touched. But gripped in its bony fingers was something far more valuable. A map. A map to a place that did not exist on any modern chart. A place surrounded by dunes and whispers, with ruins not known to any culture on record. The deeper archaeologists dug, the more it became clear. This wasn't just the burial site of a forgotten soul. It was the gateway to an erased civilization, one that had vanished long before the rise of Egypt. But something strange began to happen. The team started disappearing, and what they uncovered was never meant to be found. It was supposed to be a routine operation. In the spring of 1997, a multinational construction company was contracted by the Sudanese government to pave a new route across the eastern desert, a harsh, wind-raked expanse between the Nile and the Red Sea. A corridor of emptiness, thought to contain little more than ancient trade routes and sun-bleached rocks. Then the bulldozer hit something hard. At first, workers thought it was just another buried boulder, but the moment they cleared the sand around it, the atmosphere changed. The desert, so loud with heat, wind, and machinery, fell silent. What they uncovered was a stone marker, jet black, triangular, and far too symmetrical to be natural. And engraved on its surface were inscriptions. But not in Arabic, not in Egyptian hieroglyphs, not in any known language. No one wanted to admit it, but it looked deliberate, designed, left behind. The project manager halted the crew, radioed the capital, and within 36 hours, a small team of government officials and university archaeologists arrived by helicopter. They quickly cordoned off the site and ordered the workers to leave. The road project was abandoned. From that moment on, the tomb belonged to someone else. And things got stranger. The marker wasn't a gravestone, it was a capstone. Beneath it lay a shaft that tunneled 6 feet into the desert floor. At the bottom, a chamber no larger than a crawlspace. There were no hieroglyphics inside, no murals, no artifacts. Just a skeleton, mummified by the heat, twisted unnaturally, and clutching something that didn't belong. A map drawn on a sheet of bark skin, wrapped in aged twine. The ink was still legible, preserved in the dry air. It showed river systems that no longer existed, landmasses that had shifted, coordinates that led deeper into the desert, far from any settlements, modern or ancient. Forensic experts dated the body to at least 4,000 years old, but no one could agree on its origin. It wasn't mummified in the Egyptian style. It lacked the funerary items found in Nubian tombs. And the skeletal proportions were off. The skull was unusually elongated, the eye sockets wide, and the ribcage stunted. Genetic testing was requested, but before results came in, the body vanished. Officially, it was reported stolen. Unofficially, it was relocated by agents of Sudan's General Intelligence Service. What remained was the map. Once decoded, it led to coordinates so deep in the desert they were nearly unreachable by vehicle. And what lay there would fracture the line between myth and history. But the archaeologists didn't know that yet. They were too busy preparing their journey, unaware that something was watching them. And something was waiting to be found. They called it nonsense at first. The so-called barkskin map, clutched in the skeleton's hand, baffled even the most experienced cartographers. It was a warped and confusing patchwork. Rivers were deserts now burned, coastlines that didn't match modern satellite data, and a jagged circle near the center marked only with a single word, Aramu. That name didn't appear in any known lexicon. Not Sumerian, not Egyptian, not even among the obscure Nubian dialects catalogued by colonial linguists. It was as if someone had plucked it from a vanished tongue and buried it with a corpse no one could explain. But one linguist, a rising star from the University of Khartoum named Dr. Salma Idris, wasn't so quick to dismiss it. She noticed the symbol for Aramu wasn't just a word. It was a sigil repeated throughout the map in subtle, ritualistic formations. Even more disturbing were the shapes that surrounded it, spiral configurations etched in strange geometry that didn't belong in any natural topography. Idris cross-referenced the rivers with satellite scans of ancient waterways, some dating back to before the Sahara turned to sand. What she found startled her. The map aligned perfectly with paleohydrological models reconstructed through NASA climate data. Whoever had made this map had seen the world before the desert came. Worse, it suggested that beneath the sands, under miles of dunes, there still lay ruins. Intact, an emergency fund was raised. Permissions were quietly granted by the Sudanese Ministry of Antiquities. And soon, a joint expedition team of archaeologists, geophysicists, and a handful of private funders set out toward the location marked Aramu. They should have known something was wrong the moment the camels stopped walking. The desert was nothing new to them. They'd braved scorching heat and endless dunes before, but this place, this exact coordinate, felt wrong. There were no animals, no insects, no birds overhead. The wind didn't howl, it whispered, low and almost rhythmic. The team set up camp and began ground-penetrating radar sweeps. On the third day, they found it. 50 feet below the surface, something enormous. A perfectly geometric structure. Square angles, hallways, internal chambers. Solid stone, not eroded or scattered, but intact. This was no crumbled ruin. This was a city, preserved under the sand like Pompeii under ash. But not destroyed by disaster. Buried intentionally. They began digging. Carefully. Slowly. What they uncovered shocked even the most skeptical among them. Monolithic black stone blocks, smooth as obsidian, humming faintly with heat, as if the sun couldn't touch them. Carvings, identical to the ones found on the barkskin map, lined the entryway of what looked like a temple. But there were no gods, no pharaohs, no kings. Only a symbol, a circle swallowed by flame. Salma, Idris grew pale. She said it resembled an ancient Mesopotamian motif, the black sun, a forbidden sigil associated with the myth of a sun that devoured itself. It was outlawed even in Babylonian temples, said to represent a fallen age, a time before the gods. As the team prepared to enter the structure, their satellite phone went dead. So did the backup radios. Then the sandstorm hit. 3 hours of blinding wind and zero visibility forced them to take shelter inside the uncovered temple. What they saw within would haunt them for the rest of their lives. A corridor, lined with stone statues, each humanoid, but grotesquely altered. Long-limbed, eyeless, with open mouths frozen in screams. At the far end, an altar. And beneath it, a pit. One of the archaeologists climbed down. He never came back up. When they retrieved his body, his eyes were wide open. His mouth torn at the corners. His hands curled into claws. There were no wounds. No signs of trauma. His heart had simply stopped. They buried him in the sand. And for the first time, the team considered abandoning the dig. But curiosity, as always, has a cruel cost. Because deeper inside the ruins, they would find murals, ones that depicted cities crumbling in flame, people kneeling before something enormous in the sky, and a final image, a map. The same map they had found in the tomb, which meant the skeleton hadn't been from the city. He'd escaped from it, and he died trying to make sure no one ever found it again. The structure wasn't alone. As the excavation deepened and the sands shifted, outlines of streets emerged, avenues lined with obsidian-like buildings, courtyards that seemed arranged for ritual rather than residence, and rows of towers half-buried like teeth in the dunes. It was a city, but not for the living. There were no signs of agriculture, no infrastructure for food or water, no trash pits, no pottery fragments, no everyday tools. Aramu, if that was its name, was a place designed for something else entirely. A base of worship? A citadel of isolation? A tomb for the soul of a dead civilization? The archaeologists began to document the strange orientation of the structures. Everything pointed inward, toward a massive circular chamber in the city's center. No roof, no doors. A perfectly smooth crater of black stone nearly 200 feet wide, ringed by jagged columns. In the middle, a raised platform with grooves too large for human sacrifice, but too deliberate to be anything else. Dr. Idris was the first to say what others feared to suggest. This isn't a city. It's an altar. She was right. Beneath the central chamber, they found a network of tunnels, tight, angular passageways carved in a geometry that seemed to twist the senses. The deeper they went, the more the laws of structure unraveled. Walls began to curve where they should have met at right angles. Floors slanted in ways that bent balance. One tunnel looped impossibly back into itself. They dubbed it the looping path. Anyone who entered it alone reported intense nausea, hallucinations, and overwhelming feelings of dread. One geologist claimed he saw his mother at the end of the corridor. She'd been dead for 15 years. The path was sealed shut within a week. But the strangest artifact came from a chamber just outside the loop. Embedded in the wall was a relief. A massive carving of humanoid figures kneeling before a blazing black disk suspended in the sky. But what set it apart was the language carved beneath, 3 separate scripts. One resembled early Sumerian cuneiform. The second looked like ancient Proto-Berber glyphs. The third was unknown. They dated the carving to over 6,000 years ago. The implications were staggering. 3 separate civilizations, spanning continents, represented in a city that officially shouldn't exist, and all united in reverence to the same thing, the disk. Dr. Idris hypothesized that Aramu may have been a kind of cultural convergence point, where ancient peoples brought knowledge not to share, but to bury, to contain. But why? A breakthrough came when a linguist from Cairo deciphered a repeated phrase in the Proto-Berber script. It translated, loosely, to, "The eye returned to drink the sky." Another read, "It burned the river from the mouth upward." These weren't metaphors. They were warnings. The ancient builders of Aramu weren't worshipping something. They were hiding from it. Or trying to. The city had been buried deliberately, entombed beneath sand and silence. The skeleton from the first tomb wasn't a priest or a cartographer. He had been a survivor. And the map was a death warrant. At night, strange lights began to appear on the horizon. Silent. Pulsing. One team member swore he saw a figure standing in the sand, 100 meters out, watching. When they investigated, there were no footprints. And yet, inside the temple the next morning, they found something new etched into the altar. Fresh symbols. Not carved. Burned. The same symbols seen on the Barkskin map, and now, appearing on their satellite equipment. That night, 2 researchers left camp. They walked into the desert and never returned. The next morning, their boots were found neatly placed side by side outside the temple, still warm from the heat of their bodies. But the tracks ended there. No prints forward. No signs of struggle, as if they had simply ceased. By now, the team knew. This wasn't just an archaeological site. It was a mausoleum. For something far older, far darker, and far less human than they had ever imagined. And it was waking up. The longer they stayed, the more the city seemed to respond. The winds shifted. The temperature dropped unnaturally at night. Instruments malfunctioned with increasing frequency. GPS devices flickered, compasses spun, radiation detectors spiked briefly, then went dead. Metal tools left in certain areas began to warp subtly, as though something was pulling at their atomic structure. But the most disturbing changes weren't environmental. They were psychological. Sleep became impossible. Nightmares plagued even brief moments of rest. Dreams of cities submerged in red oceans, of black stars dripping light like molten tar, of a voice humming beneath the sand that spoke without words. One by one, members of the team began reporting identical visions, a massive black disk in the sky, descending over a screaming city, a sun with no warmth, a hunger with no mouth. They had stumbled into the myth of the Black Sun. Dr. Idris, increasingly gaunt and driven, locked herself in the documentation tent for days, comparing every symbol they found with ancient mythologies. And in the forgotten corners of Mesopotamian demonology, in the footnotes of suppressed texts, she discovered something horrifying. The Black Sun wasn't just a myth. It was a cipher, an archetype that appeared, again and again, across ancient cultures who should have never contacted each other. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica, the Dogon of Mali, the Indus Valley Seals, even prehistoric cave art in the Pyrenees. Always the same motif. A disk, black, radiant, surrounded by figures in pain or awe. The Black Sun represented something primal, a celestial body that shouldn't exist, one that appeared at the end of ages, bringing knowledge so devastating that entire cultures buried it rather than pass it on. In many accounts, it didn't merely destroy civilizations. It rewrote them. And now it was here, in the bones of Aramu, whispering again. One morning, just before dawn, a new statue was found in the plaza. No one had carved it. No tools left behind. No tire tracks or boot prints. It simply appeared. 7 feet tall, humanoid, with elongated limbs, no mouth, no eyes, just a wide, circular depression where the face should have been, like a dish waiting to be filled. The team couldn't explain it. Some wanted to destroy it. Others wanted to leave. No one agreed. But they stayed. Because beneath that statue, in a chamber they hadn't yet explored, they found something else. A second map. Frescoed into the floor in gold leaf, barely visible beneath layers of soot and ash. This map was different. It didn't lead into the desert. It spiraled down, coordinates pointing not to a location, but a depth. Under Aramu, beneath the altar, below even the tunnels. A final chamber. Sealed. The glyphs around it were unlike anything they'd seen before. Angular, overlapping, almost multidimensional in form. They pulsed faintly under blacklight, as if painted in materials unknown to modern science. The phrase repeated again and again around the spiral. To speak its name is to lose your own. This wasn't a burial chamber. It was a prison, and something had been locked inside it for a very long time. That night, another member of the team went missing. This time, they left behind not only boots, but pages of their journal, scribbled with incomprehensible text in a language they never knew. The team was crumbling. Half wanted to leave. The other half couldn't stop digging. And by morning, the desert gave its answer. The altar had cracked. A thin fissure down the center, as if something beneath it had exhaled. By the time the crack appeared in the altar, the team was already unraveling. Sleep deprivation turned to paranoia. Some members stopped speaking entirely, staring into the sand for hours without moving. Others became violent, accusing their colleagues of sabotage, theft, even possession. One technician attempted to burn the supply tent, shouting that the sky is eating the ground. He had to be restrained and sedated. The expedition had slipped from science into something else, something primal. And whatever lay beneath that altar, whatever had been sealed away for millennia, knew they were coming. Dr. Idris tried to send a report. She packed hard drives with images, notes, and recordings. She hiked a mile out from camp with a sat phone, hoping the interference would lessen. It didn't. The sky above Aramu had become a blind spot. Satellites could no longer see it. Signals could no longer reach it. It was as if a black veil had been drawn over the site, one that the modern world could not pierce. And then, people began to vanish in pairs. Not randomly, deliberately. The geologist and the surveyor, gone. No trace. 2 days later, the Cairo linguist and his assistant. Their gear was left behind, untouched. Only their boots were missing. It wasn't just death they were facing. It was removal. Erasure. Dr. Idris became convinced they were being absorbed, taken into whatever Aramu had been built to contain. Not physically devoured, but converted into silence. A metaphysical amnesia. She proposed something dangerous, to open the sealed chamber beneath the altar, not out of curiosity, but to understand what they were facing. The rest of the team disagreed. They had come for knowledge, not suicide. That night, a vote was held. 5 to stay, 4 to leave. The next morning, the 4 who wanted to leave were gone. Their tents were flattened. Their packs unzipped. Their footprints led toward the horizon, then stopped. No bodies were ever found. At this point, Idris stopped taking notes. Her journal entries became manic, frenzied. Notations of time lost, days missing. Her final written line before abandoning the log read, "It knows when we doubt. It feeds when we fear." A week later, a helicopter arrived, unannounced. Not from the university. Not from the Ministry of Antiquities. This was military. No insignias. No flight plan. 6 men stepped out. All armed. All silent. They spoke to no one. They collected samples, confiscated maps, took photographs, then burned all physical notes. Hard drives were seized. Dr. Idris, sedated. 3 team members were loaded onto the chopper and flown out. The rest were ordered to stay, under biocontainment protocols. No explanation given. 2 nights later, the rest of the excavation team, every single one of them, disappeared. No message. No distress call. No bodies. When a second chopper returned a week later, it found only empty tents. The equipment had been buried under windblown dunes. Aramu looked untouched. as if no one had ever been there. The military classified the site. All access routes sealed. The road construction never resumed. The coordinates were wiped from internal systems. Maps redrawn. But whispers got out. Satellite technicians reported a circular, dead zone over the eastern desert. No data, no images. Only static. Pilots flying over the area at high altitude described blinding sun flares and black, circular shadows on the dunes. One pilot, who violated the airspace by accident, later said something was looking back at him from the desert. He never flew again. Months passed, then years. Dr. Salma Idris was never seen publicly again. But fragments of her journal were leaked by an unknown insider. Among them, one final map, drawn not in ink, but in blood. A spiral, ever descending. At the center, a black circle, surrounded by text translated roughly from a dead language. All suns burn. All knowledge rots. The first light returns. The last words scribbled below. We didn't find Aramu. It called us. And still, something waits beneath the sand. Something old enough to remember when the stars were young. Aramu no longer appears on any map. Satellite records from 1997 to 1999 have been scrubbed. Road plans mysteriously rerouted. Academic papers referencing the excavation have been retracted or rewritten. The university team credited with the discovery? Their names have vanished from institutional records. All except one. A grainy video, never aired publicly, surfaced on the dark web in 2004. No title, no metadata, just a timestamp and a flickering desert horizon. In the footage, a woman, emaciated, barefoot, wrapped in linen, stumbles across frame. Her voice is hoarse, but clear. It dreams of being worshipped again. The video ends with a low, unplaceable hum. Subsonic. Felt more than heard. Many believe this was Dr. Salma Idris. But no proof has ever confirmed her fate. What we know, what little was preserved through leaks and stolen fragments, is this. Aramu was not a city built for the living. It had no economy, no walls, no homes. It existed for one purpose: to house something the world was never meant to rediscover. From the symbols of the black sun to the looping path that warped geometry itself, Aramu functioned as a containment zone for a force too vast, too corrosive to describe. Its language degraded memory. Its image infected thought. This was not knowledge. This was contagion. And time had done what human hands could not. Buried it. But the world is forgetting how to forget. Satellites skin too deep. Machines listen too well. And in our endless thirst to uncover the past, we are digging towards something that was intentionally sealed. A civilization older than Sumer. More secret than Egypt. With gods that left no myths, only warnings. The geometry of its temples mirrored celestial patterns not seen in thousands of years. Their cycles are returning. Some claim the obelisk at the original tomb now hums faintly during equinoxes. Others say those who've seen the map in full cannot sleep without hearing whispers in their bones. Governments deny the existence of the site. And yet, somewhere in a locked archive, a final image exists. Taken with analog film, smuggled out before the final team vanished. It shows the altar at the heart of Aramu, cracked down the center. And something beneath it, reaching. The photo is blurry. Low contrast, but you can make out fingers. Not human ones. Long, thin, segmented, and clawed. Aramu wasn't built to honor a god. It was built to trap one. And now, the sand no longer holds. Some stories don't end. They just sink, deeper and deeper into silence, waiting for someone arrogant enough to dig them back up. The tale of Aramu is one that official history refuses to touch. No textbooks. No museum exhibits. Only whispers, half-redacted files, and the haunted eyes of those who almost made it back. What happened in the Sudanese desert wasn't just an archaeological anomaly. It was a confrontation with something older than humanity's myths. Something that devours civilizations not through conquest, but through revelation. If this story chilled you, unsettled you, or left you with more questions than answers, that's exactly what it was meant to do. Because maybe, just maybe, there are places on this earth we were never meant to uncover, and stories buried for a reason. If you're drawn to the forbidden corners of history, the lost, the erased, the dangerous, subscribe for more tales that explore the cracks in reality. Comment below what you think Aramu really was. Another civilization? A prison? A warning? or something else entirely. Watch another episode if you dare. Because the past isn't dead. It's just waiting for someone to notice it again.